Hello, Spencer. I'm so excited to have you here. How are you?
Great. How are you, Cami?
I'm doing well. Fresh off of clock, we are.
Yeah, maybe caught up on sleep. Probably not.
Maybe, probably not, but trying our best. With the Memorial Day weekend, we got an extra day, so
Right.
I'm so super happy to have you here. We're going to talk a little bit about clock and why you should attend and some of your favorite sessions. But before we do that, I wanted to kick off with how long we've known each other, where we ran across each other, and what you've been doing in your CLM career for the last several years. So I'm going to kick it to you for
Sure.
intros. Tell us all the things.
Yeah. So let's see. Well, intros first. My name's
Yes.
Spencer Ellsworth. I am a CLM consultant, artist, game master. I don't like defining myself just by my main day job. Um,
Right?
and I currently work for a great consulting firm called Spalding Ridge, doing CLM implementations there.
Mm-hmm.
The Spalding Ridge is all about like best in cloud implementations. And
Yes.
so right now I'm working with primarily on implementing DocuSign CLM,
Mm-hmm.
though it's been a long winding CLM road to get to this point. At several points, our paths have crossed in there.
Right?
You mentioned how long have we known each other? Probably technically like 10 or 11 years.
I think
Because that was
so.
how long ago I was working at Selectica, and that was maybe around the same time that you were also working at Selectica.
Mm-hmm.
But um, we have a lot of people in our lives in common.
We do. It's just the nature of the beast, I think, in CLM. If you've been in this industry for any amount of time, that we run across either we've worked together or we've implemented together. It was a customer that went in house with a consultant. So,
Right.
gosh, I'm always like, how do we know each other? Did we implement together? Did we work at a CLM vendor together? So my history, I'm always like, we know each other, but how? So,
Right.
we were at, I think we just missed each other, or we were overlapped a little bit at Selectica, which I consider to be like one of the CLM version 1.0 series,
Yep.
back from early 2000s, right? And at
Right.
that time, I was doing implementations and a little bit of the customer success motion, so post account implementation. And you were coming on board strictly as a business analyst during those days, or were
Brand
you
new
implementing as an
consultant.
engagement? Brand
Nope,
new.
brand new consultant, straight out of college, had no idea what I was getting myself into with CLM, had no idea that CLM existed.
Yeah.
And it was I think we were at the time like it was a fresh new team as well.
Mm-hmm.
I was like one of three consultants on the team at the time,
Yeah.
who were coming in, and yeah, coming in, Julie Prieto took me under her wing. Shout out to Julie.
Shout out to
And
Julie. We love
yeah,
Julie.
just taught me all the
Mhm.
core baseline of consulting that I needed to know. And then
Mhm.
6 months into it was like, oh my gosh, how does anyone do business without a CLM at that
Right?
point? And
It
the rest is
touches
history.
everything. I
Yeah,
have to, so brief shout out to Julie in that she also taught me everything I know.
awesome.
Yeah, Julie Prieto, she is who I would consider sort of a career business analyst. Like, she really has elevated the game. A lot of the time in this industry, when you come into CLM or software implementations, you start as a business analyst because they're the person that's collecting the requirements, the data, they're documenting it. So it can be kind of a junior level role for you to get started, right? And then you work your way up to PM,
Right.
project management. That's not always the case. Like with Julie, for the longest time, she was like the best in class business analyst. And I've worked with her in a lot of different
Absolutely.
companies. And didn't mean to spend like 15 minutes of the podcast talking about Julie, but she's worth mentioning.
No, it's all good. And then, like, you and I were talking recently about in the intro to your book, you give a huge shout out to Jim O'Hare, who was
Yes.
another major figure in my career that we have in
Yeah.
common.
Yeah.
So after I left Selectica, I went to go work for Model N on their
Mm-hmm.
CLM for a while, and then
Yeah.
after Model N, hopped over to Conga, and you
Mm-hmm.
and I have a bunch of friends in common from Conga. But I
Yeah.
worked directly for Jim O'Hare during a another transformative time in their professional services team, where they were
Yep.
shifting from like a single implementer model to having actual project teams, and
Yeah.
so yeah, and then back to Model N for a little bit when we were talking about earlier about breaks from CLM. That was my
Yes.
one break from CLM.
Hmm.
Spent 6 months working on rebate management, which was a fascinating industry,
Right.
and not something I've ever returned back to.
Yeah.
But then, got an opportunity at Spalding Ridge to kind of step away from working for a vendor directly,
Hmm.
which has been a really interesting and great experience.
Yeah.
Sort of taking a step back into more of a generic CLM consultant,
Yeah.
if you will, role,
Yeah.
rather than like being yes, I'm a DocuSign consultant or a
Right.
Conga consultant or, even a determined consultant.
Right. I know. Cause I feel the same way. So I've been what I call agnostic for a couple years now. It's been a while. After my transition, I spent a brief time at Okta, in identity and access management, which was a lot harder than CLM
Oh,
because I had to
sure.
learn so much about API calls and all the
Right.
software. And, at that point, we were having discussions with the CISOs. It wasn't the legal team. So it was a totally different way for like my brain to have to work with people and customers and technology. So I think breaks are good, right? They
Yeah.
give us a different perspective.
Yeah.
And then, we find ourselves back here in the land of CLM.
Exactly. Oh,
Yeah,
legal operations will never
legal
leave.
ops, no, we'll never leave. If you have an appetite for efficiency, you may just be a legal ops person. So, yeah, back to Jim. So Jim was my transition into CLM from the legal world. I was working as a paralegal, supporting in-house counsel, looking at CLM tools.
Mhm.
And he said, "Hey, I think you'd be really good at this implementation stuff." And I was like, "What's that?" But I'm intrigued. So yeah, he started off my career, and he and I have worked together at multiple companies since then. So he's like the
Awesome.
godfather of CLM.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely.
I'll have to tell him I just gave him that nickname. But anyway, back to you. So you did this sort of, you hopped around to a couple of different ones. You worked at vendors, and now you're a consultant. And what do you like the most about being, what did you call it? Just a average CLM consultant instead of with a vendor? What do you like about that more?
Yeah, so honestly, like the best projects, the most enjoyable projects that I've ever worked on have been where there isn't a vendor that's been selected yet, and
Yeah.
where like I can come in and talk with a prospective customer about what their needs are, do some sort of a discovery, walking through what their current process is and their future process, and really not have the constraints of having
Hmm.
to design to a system
Yeah.
or even like doing discovery like within the grounds of a system.
Yeah.
Like we can talk about all kinds of integrations, their future vision, because having for them to have that future vision in mind from the very beginning, even if it's not going to be the very first thing that they implement in their first 6 months of their CLM journey, like
Yeah.
for them to know that that is something that they want to get to is incredibly important with that vendor selection.
Yeah.
And
I
just
agree.
having, so being able to have those conversations without the constraints of, oh, the tool can't do that, or the tool could do that, but maybe, down the road, that sort of thing, sort of also helps to inform that vendor selection. And there
Yeah.
haven't been too many projects where I've gotten the opportunity to sort of do discovery before the RFP process and before vendor selection.
Yeah.
But the couple that I have been, I feel like they've really uncovered a lot of good detail that, maybe the prospect even had a vendor in mind already.
Yeah.
And it just sort of like helps to confirm that that is actually going to work out for them. Or in some cases, like confirms that like, oh, you actually have a major need for an integration with a vendor management system. Turns
Right.
out the vendor you were looking at, their CLM doesn't do that, it doesn't integrate with
Yes.
Coupa or whatever.
Yeah.
And so getting the opportunity to do that is great. But it's also
Yeah.
really fun for me getting to go to legal operations conferences,
Yeah.
like Legal Week, like CLOC Global Institute in Las
Hmm.
Vegas, and walk around and talk with CLM vendors and get a feel for what the latest and greatest out there is. The
Yeah.
industry is incredibly saturated with
Yeah.
CLM offerings at this point, and so being able to have these discussions with different vendors, find out what their latest innovation in the space is, really helps to kind of see also, like helps me to see sort of where the CLM market is going,
Yeah.
beyond what's on the roadmap for whatever tool it is that I'm implementing at this point in time.
Yeah.
And especially right now with AI being such a big thing, like seeing, okay, how many vendors are talking about AI? How many of them actually have something to show for what they're talking about with
Right.
AI? That sort of thing.
Right.
And
Right.
so
I
getting,
had
yeah,
similar conversations about is everyone going to talk about AI at CLOC? Probably.
the answer was
Yeah.
yes,
The
absolutely.
answer is yes. That's what
With
happened.
Clock's new,
And
like,
it was great.
yeah, with their new like brain date, uh, not like setup, where,
It's part of the app. For those of you that haven't been to CLOC
yeah,
conference, we're going to get into why you should attend. But just the mechanics of it, what Spencer and I are talking about is when you sign up or register, there's an app that's associated with it, so you can add your different sessions you want to go
yep,
to. You can connect with people in app, and then there's also the ability to create a brain date, which was new this year. And so brain date is a kind of a plug-in to the CLOC app where you can meet with people and have just a brain date, talk
yeah,
about brain stuff
little
and
ad
smart
hoc
stuff.
small group
Yeah.
conversations,
Hmm.
usually with a theme, and
Yeah.
so very different from actually attending one of the informational sessions.
Yeah.
But there was somebody that I was talking with at Clock who joked about, like, there are so many brain dates about AI that they wanted to just
Hmm.
have a brain date to like regurgitate all the information that they
All the
learned about
things.
AI,
Yeah.
in all from all those other sessions, so that not
Yeah.
everybody had to go to all of them. Yeah, it was certainly
Yeah.
a big topic this year. Um,
Yeah, and why? So I have my own opinion about why I think that is, and I'll share a little bit. I have some sessions coming up on AI in CLM on the podcast. So you know, not to share every single thing I'm going to talk about in those, so that we have something to look forward to.
sure.
But I do what I did want to touch on is I think. I mean, we know as practitioners that AI and machine learning have been embedded in CLM and other software for a very long time.
Yeah,
AI, that it came out in 1950, and we've been utilizing it in various ways. Like when you talk to Siri, that's voice recognition, or when you
right.
talk to Alexa, that's a form of AI. So there's forms out there that we just as everyday consumers have a feeling it's there. Like when I'm talking to my husband about a new refrigerator that I think we need, and then suddenly I see ads on my phone about new refrigerators.
Right.
Like those kinds of things are there and they have been.
Sure.
But what I think why we're experiencing what we're experiencing now is because the us humans actually can control the output of AI with ChatGPT, and that was a user experience we've never had before.
Yeah.
So it's the new where I am seeing it as it's not exactly new.
No.
We've been using it for a long time, and here's how. So I'm going to talk about that in some later podcasts. But I'm curious what you think about this, like everyone kind of freaking out about AI in CLM. Why do you think that
Yeah.
is? And what do you think it means for the future of the industry?
There is a lot of hype around it, and I
Hmm.
think, maybe a little bit of a cynical approach. Like a lot of that hype is probably sales hype, because the more customers that get on board with the individual things, the more money their teams will have to actually continue to develop the products and like get it to
Right.
a certain point.
That's true.
But all of that being said, like I think within CLM especially, I think that there is probably going to be some level of sort of like the advertisements you were talking about, as
Hmm.
far like predictive nature. I think
Yes.
that within CLM, that's probably where we're going to see the biggest benefits, is in like the predictive nature of negotiations and
Yeah.
redlining. And that's not exclusive to CLM. I think that there are probably
Right.
companies who are doing that independent of a CLM tool. And for
Right.
those companies that are doing that, like, hey, you should, go hit up all these CLM vendors and see if they want to incorporate that, because that'd be a huge, a much bigger
Oh, right.
benefit within a CLM tool, even if it's also its own independent function. Um,
Yeah. I
so
would
I
agree.
think that we're going to see a lot of that. I think that the actual, I saw a couple of vendors talking about like, oh, AI drafting your contracts for you, and I think that, as somebody who's been looked at far too many contract templates over my career, I am not sure that that's exactly where where legal folks necessarily want the tool to go.
The tool to
Uh,
go.
they,
Yeah.
they like their control. They love having like finite control over what's being created and
Yeah.
where what the output actually is. And
Right.
so I think that there's probably going to be a little bit of hesitancy to that. But I'm also very open to seeing, if we can shorten contract drafting times, that's
Hmm.
still one of the biggest usages of time, even with the time savings that CLM brings you.
Yeah.
So
And I
we'll see.
also think as implementers, you and I know this, and that is the expectation for connectivity among applications that you use on a daily basis, and how can you string that together. Earlier, you talked about that, and they wanted to they wanted to integrate 5 different external
Right.
systems. It used to be until very recently that doing that was very, very, very expensive,
Yeah.
and you had to figure if the benefit of that automation was going to outweigh the cost of implementation.
Sure.
And so what I think that this new sort of horizon of CLM AI gives us are automation on a level that we've never seen before,
Yeah.
because we don't have to write the code. We don't have to
Right.
do the connection. It's not as hard or expensive. So those
Yeah.
barriers, I think, are going to be removed for CLM implementation, which I'm excited about.
Yeah. I think you'll probably see a lot more CLM vendors drift in the way of having some like middleware connection for a
Yeah.
lot of other connections to other tools, because like direct connections, you know, even like having open APIs, that's great.
Mm-hmm.
Like having to have a direct connection for everything versus being able to just like funnel into some middleware and then connect to a bunch of other tools.
Yeah,
Um, I think that brings a lot of benefit to
I
many
do too.
different CLM tools, especially for those companies where they're looking at rolling it out enterprise wide and they're like, we want it to connect to everything.
Yeah,
Um,
we
it's
want the
probably,
magic button.
again, it's great
Give us.
for somebody to be thinking about that, like as a, yeah, this is our, roadmap 5 years down the road. We want it to connect with all of these different tools because we're bringing sales and procurement and HR all onto the same CLM system. Um, which,
Which is the dream.
yeah,
That is the dream.
absolutely. I'm all in favor of that.
The
There,
reality of that is tough for organizations, but that
right.
is the dream usually, right? Yeah. So let's talk about like the future of AI, and conferences like these are important because you can sort of synthesize the information when you are, you plan your list of things you want to listen to and see when you're at
Yeah,
a conference like CLOC. And CLOC is like the place to go if you're in legal operations, right? The
definitely.
sheer enormity of the conference and how big it's gotten and how many people are there and the after parties, like it's the place to be. It's a lot of
Shout out to
fun.
the after parties. And
Shout
the
out to the after parties. Yes, the after parties are epic, and you want to get on those invite lists.
yeah,
So the thing that I like from the perspective, like you and I are implementation. Um, we've done implementations. We know vendors. So for us to go, sometimes really what we're learning about is the roadmap. That we would learn that anyway in another meeting. It's not at CLOC. Like that's
sure,
not so. It's more about networking. I
definitely.
think for people in our role, right, we want to meet customers, we want to talk to vendors about what they're doing, but we sort of already have a little bit of visibility because we are partner implementation
Right.
experts, and that they share that stuff with us, right? So this is not new for us as so much as it is maybe vendors that are customers that are looking to purchase,
Yeah.
and they're looking to meet people that have done it before so they
Yeah.
can get information, right? So if you are someone, I was going to kind of talk about personas. If you're someone that is looking to purchase legal technology, or CLM being one of those, I consider legal technology.
Yeah.
CLOC is something you should attend. I
Definitely.
think you should attend Legal Geek if you can, or Legal Week if you can. Legal Week if you can.
Legal Geek too.
Um,
It's a one
Legal
day
Geek,
conference, but
it's one
it's
day.
cheap. It's in
Yes,
Chicago. Yeah, go to Legal Geek as
it's
well.
a
Why not?
it's a good one, right? And you're gonna hear different perspectives than you would hear maybe at CLOC or wherever. But the
Definitely.
point being, if you can engage in those kinds of conferences, you should.
Yeah.
And what should you be looking? What would you recommend to one of your customers who's like, I'm still trying to figure this out. I want to meet people. I want to hear stories. I want to look at what the vendors are doing. What would you
Sure.
recommend to them?
For somebody who is looking to purchase legal technology, um, conferences like CLOC are going to be a great opportunity for you to walk around and see all the different vendors. If you don't already have a list of vendors, like it's, yeah, you could probably, given the sheer number of them that are out there today, there's probably something to be said for walking around and just make a list of all the CLM vendors and chat with all of them, have a brief conversation. You can
See
sign up
which
for
ones give you the best swag,
see which ones
right?
invite you to dinner afterward.
Right, get a dinner.
You
Yeah.
know, there's you certainly could see a demo of every single one of them, but like
Mhm.
I wouldn't use CLOC or a conference like that as your like vetting and selection process. They're going to show
Yeah.
you a quick demo, you know, which might be great. That might be something that's really attractive. And
But it might totally not, might not be your use case or your
right,
vertical, or it might not be,
and just
yeah,
because their marketing budget was big enough to get a bigger booth than the CLM vendor next to them doesn't necessarily mean that they are a better fit for your use case and your
right,
business. So
right.
like do use it as an opportunity to kind of network with the vendors and
Hmm.
get a chance to talk to them and get on their radar as somebody who is looking for that legal technology. Uh,
Yeah.
but I think that to the point about networking, like network with other people, go to the sessions that are actually being held on CLM and
Hmm.
hear those out, because even though those are oftentimes being hosted by a specific vendor and the panelists that they've brought on board, there's something beneficial. Like especially in recent years, like CLOC has intentionally tried to not be an opportunity for vendors to sales pitch during
Right.
these sessions. And so
That's
they
right.
are going to want, uh, those sessions are going to have a message that is good for you, regardless of what vendor you're looking at.
Right.
And
Agree.
especially as it relates to CLM implementation,
Hmm.
you'll oftentimes, a lot of vendors really like to bring on customers of theirs to talk about the customer journey and what that looked like. And there are lessons to be learned regardless of who the customer is, what industry they are, and regardless of what vendor it is.
Yeah.
There was a fantastic session that I went to during Legal Week, actually, this year,
Hmm.
that was a vendor and the implementation partner and the customer all on stage
Nice.
together and talking about that journey together. And I don't even remember who the vendor was, but the messages that came out of that about the importance, or the benefits at least, of having an implementation partner involved with the vendor, bringing
Yeah.
those years of experience to the table to perform their implementation,
Hmm.
was huge, and I think it was beneficial. Sessions like that would be really beneficial
Yeah.
to anybody who's looking to do an implementation, quite frankly, of anything. It doesn't have to be CLM. It could be
Doesn't
a
have to be
matter
CLM.
management system. There's
Yep.
plenty of those at CLOC as well, you know, or a document management, anything like that. I think it'll also, if you go to one of these and you know that you need one of these tools, you already have gotten to that point where
Hmm.
um, you know you're on a mission. You know that you want one of these tools. You can also, I think, there's an opportunity to educate yourself about
Hmm.
the perspective, the benefits, as well as educate yourself on like how you're going to be able to take that back and sell that to the rest of your business, especially if you don't
Yes.
yet have you know, procurement's blank check for whatever
Right.
the system is that you're going to sell.
Yeah.
At CLOC this year, there was a great session on making the case for CLM, and it was
Yes.
talking about like how you could take that back, who you needed to get buy-in from, how to get that buy-in, what
Hmm.
different people cared about, because all these different stakeholders, some of
Yeah.
whom are going to be decision makers, some of whom are going to be writing the check. All those different decision makers are going to have something different they care about. Um,
Yeah. I
and
agree.
so,
I agree. And you know what you know where I think another area to focus on are actually the partners that implement. And this sounds
definitely.
like a totally selfish plug, and it is. But and the reason it is because this is, I'm going back to something you touched on in the very beginning of our phone call of the podcast, which is what you get to do before a tool is selected in
Yeah,
helping a customer prepare, because I think that that's overlooked a lot of times. What happens in sales deals that I'm involved in is the vendor brings them to the partner to say, we are a partner with these three people, we're going to let you interview them, and then
right.
you decide who you like, and then they can give you a quote. and et cetera, et cetera. That's usually how the relationship happens. But I feel like I wish that it could be the other way around, where they would come and find the partner first, and then the partner could help them with vendor selection and help them define
Sure.
requirements. I think we'd have a higher success rate in
Definitely.
implementations if we went that way. And then my question to you is, did you see very many implementation partner sessions where
Not
they
a lot.
talked about how they do that,
Yep.
how they prep, how they get ready? Yeah,
Not a lot. It was mostly vendor-led sessions. There were some
I think so
sessions that
too.
had partners in them. There were some sessions, such as the session that the session that DocuSign, where they brought in like three of their different customers. Like they all made
Yes.
reference to having worked with partners, but there wasn't actually an opportunity for that I saw, at least, for a lot of like
Yeah.
partner-led sessions to be a part of
Yeah.
that. To that point about like the success rate there, I think you'd also probably see a lot less heartache on the part of the customer if,
Yeah.
by the time, they weren't going ahead and purchasing licenses for something that then they're realizing, oh shoot, we've got like 6 months of prep work to do
Right.
before we can even get this project off the ground.
Yeah.
And then they're not showing up to an implementation partner as well,
Hmm.
to say, hey, we're ready to get going. The implementation partner says, hey, great, do you have all this homework done in advance that like you probably
Yeah.
don't want us to bill you to help you
Right.
with?
Right.
But like somebody has to tell the implementation team, the customer implementation team,
Yeah.
that that's necessary. And unless they've got
Yes.
like you or I working on their legal ops team, or unless they're, now I start to see a lot more legal teams, especially where it's like, oh yeah, this person implemented CLM at like three of their past companies, and so they've gone through this before and they've got a little bit of information about that. But even
Yeah.
then, like those folks, I never expect them to be implementation experts. Like,
Right. No, they don't do this for a living. Like they
right,
may have translated requirements or they may
right,
have helped with the implementation, but like getting ready for an implementation, and this is not just CLM. There are some things
yeah,
specific to CLM, but there is a good amount of runway that you have to cover
yep,
before you're ready to jump in the ring with your implementation partner
most definitely,
and be prepared to have the discussions that they're going to ask you for day one. And so you and I see this a lot where the deal is inked and everyone's ready to go, and then it's like 6 months of
yep,
requirements gathering because that customer didn't spend the time. They didn't know, right?
right.
They're like, okay, first thing, pick a vendor.
Yeah.
It's
Or
not the
as
first thing.
as you referenced in your book, like first thing, get all your contract templates together. Oh, that's
Yeah.
going to take 6 months by itself because
Oh,
we actually
yeah.
don't know where all the contract templates are. And their
Yeah.
contract templates, people are submitting their own versions. And now we're having to do a
Yes.
reconciliation exercise that we've
Yes.
never done before because our NDA has 18 different versions somehow.
Right. Right.
Or in that level of like reconciliation and
Yeah.
trying to decide what are we actually going to implement,
Hmm.
is huge. It's a major part of all of these. Like even when I take a
Yeah.
look at a statement of work that I have for an implementation with a customer, and it says we're implementing the MSA for Canada and the United States, and immediately I'm like,
Hmm.
why are there two different MSAs? And then usually there's an
Yes.
actual reason for it, but oftentimes it's not just two MSAs. There's actually a multitude of different
It's
versions that
Yeah.
haven't yet been
It's
reconciled.
it's a process for the US. It's a process
Right.
for Canada. And there's who knows how many MSAs in between.
Yeah.
And we have to figure that out. And so what happens then is, this is a sort of some insight into a partner and how we quote things and how we bill things. But what happens is we get a list of what you want to try to accomplish in your,
Hmm.
say, phase one. And it's the MSA in Canada and the MSA in the United States. And we're estimating based on you having all your homework
Right.
done that it's going to cost X and it's going to take this long.
Hmm.
And then once your excited project manager gets assigned and you're all having your first kickoff meeting, and then we realize that none of that homework has been done, then everyone on the partner side is like, oh,
Yeah. Yeah.
oh, wait a minute, this is doesn't bode well,
Sure.
right?
And to be
Yeah.
fair, we as partners ought to be doing something to help with that. From the
Yeah.
moment there is an initial like introduction between the
Hmm.
customer and the partner, like that partner should be sending you homework. So
Yeah.
customers
Agree.
out there, prospective customers out there, like if your partner isn't sending you a list of homework to do, ask them what you need to be doing,
Right.
and all like, and make sure that they are telling you, because otherwise you are going to spend a lot of time that is billable time,
Billable.
and like you're going to be spending a lot of time with them trying to help you do your homework, which you may have questions, you may want to go back to them and like have questions about the homework, but a
Hmm.
lot of that is work for the
Yeah.
team to be doing before the implementation ever gets off the ground, because they're going to be asking you questions about your templates, about your current process, about your even
Right.
some of your desires for your future process.
Right.
You allude to this in your book too, Cami, like having your process actually documented and like what your current process is. The number of implementations that I've walked into that had zero idea what their current process actually was, and
Right.
we planned on having a 2 hour conversation about it because I was on
Yeah.
site with them, and instead it was 2.5 days of whiteboarding out their current process.
Yeah.
That and
I have
yeah, it happens far
countless
too often.
nightmares. I have countless nightmares of that.
But it's great. Like that
I,
part, it's necessary. It has to happen,
mhm.
and it gives everybody a good starting point. So, like that's, I would say, in slight defense of actually having to do the homework later on, at least it's getting done. At least
Right.
it is putting everybody on the same page. And sometimes, um, having a partner in the room for some of those conversations can really help to uncover parts of the process that maybe weren't considered
Yeah.
originally.
Yeah, I would agree. And I mean, it is super helpful to walk through, but like the way that I would love if we could approach requirements gathering in every single project is
Yeah,
as validation.
that'd be
We're
awesome.
validating what the customer has already collected and is sharing, and then we're offering, because really, dear customers that are listening to this podcast, where we're trying to get to is we're trying to
Right.
understand your business, how you conduct business on a day-to-day basis, who the players are, what you're buying or selling, and how you're doing that contractually. And we're trying to take all that information
Yep.
and put it into a design for a tool. So we're trying to synthesize it down. And if we're talking to you through all these, well, we think somebody emails us the agreement,
Right.
like that's going to take us a lot longer to get to the design, the design state that we're looking for.
Yeah.
Right. So
Yeah,
yeah.
your partner should not be writing user stories for you.
Right.
They should be helping to validate the user stories are accurate and that the content of them are accurate. But at the end of the day, like they are user stories. They should be coming
Yeah.
from the users, and
Hmm.
oftentimes like that might take a business analyst to help put that into words. Like
Hmm.
we realize that like all of our customers have day jobs. Oftentimes they didn't hire a BA, or they don't have a project manager who's exclusive to the project and therefore can act as that business analyst role to do all of
Right.
that documentation.
Hmm.
And so, certainly lean on the partner to help with that, but it's not exclusively their job, and it's not exclusively the job of the customer either to be
Yeah.
coming up with that. It's a partnership, it's a team effort for everybody to come together, and it needs to have that level of collaboration involved.
Absolutely. And if you're a customer that just is like, you know what, I need a consultant to come in and help me do this because we've had layoffs and we're lean and I don't have the time to figure it
Sure.
out. Great. That's what
Yeah,
we're here for.
absolutely.
But let's all be clear that we need that help up front. Like, listen, partner that I selected, I don't know where all my templates are. You're going to
Right.
have to spend time talking to users and get their stories. Then fantastic. We can do that. But I think it's just having a real clarity about what you need as a customer walking in.
Sure.
Right.
And
Yeah.
don't get me, at this, you know, at the same time, like I'm happy to tell my customers what it is that they want if they don't know, or at
Yeah.
least like make a strong recommendation.
Right.
I'm not a part of their business at the end of the day. Like I only
Hmm.
know what I've heard by being on meetings
Right.
for 2 weeks, or whatever.
Yeah.
I'm happy to make recommendations as a partner, as a CLM consultant, because after a certain number of CLM implementations, you've seen just about everything. Despite the
Yes.
fact that so many business processes seem unique, seem special
Yeah.
across many different industries, at the end of the
Hmm.
day, there's a lot of commonality among all of them. And
Yeah.
Cami, you and I have probably seen just about everything at this point in time.
Yeah.
And so
That's true.
even if it's not
That's true.
exactly the same, it at least like leverage having a partner who has that experience, who can
Hmm.
come in and say, yeah, I've seen these 5 things in the past, which of these is closest to the situation that we're dealing with here, which of these seems like it'd be beneficial for you. Let's weigh the pros and cons and help you actually make a decision that's going to
Yes.
lead to an ideal choice for now. Like that was one
Hmm.
of the key things that I think I got out of some of the sessions that I attended at CLOC was like there's a lot of talk about, great, we've done our implementation, now we're implemented, we have a CLM system. Like that shouldn't be the end. Like there should never be
No.
an end to your CLM implementation. Even if you
Yeah.
never plan on expanding, you should at least plan on revisiting and like
Yeah.
reevaluating in 6 months, a year, whatever, whatever makes sense for your business in terms of how quickly things change. Reevaluate and see if you need to change, hopefully not change your entire CLM system, but at the very
Right.
least, like,
That's tough.
make some changes to it so that it continues to work for your business and
Hmm.
so that it doesn't drive people to start working around it, because that's
Yeah,
probably
that's
what
the
was
worst.
happening prior to the CLM
Hmm.
implementation, was people were working around the processes because the process wasn't working for them anymore. And
Right.
so make sure that you continue to use that tool, or else it's just going to become the roadblock that you were trying to avoid by implementing it in
To
the
I.
first place.
Yeah, I totally agree. And there's a whole like next step to your CLM implementation, which is growing the maturity of it,
Yeah,
right? So it might just be that you got your NDA stood up, awesome, and you're not, and sales is doing it, and they are self serve, but you still have your really tough contracts still to build.
right.
So there's always another thing that you can do. If it's not that, then you can add to your clause library. There's
Sure.
always things that you can be doing, and the laws and regulations change every year. You can update templates, and one of the things that I really love to get to is a level of maturity where you can make proactive contracting decisions.
Yeah,
And not many customers are living that life, right? They're like,
right.
everything's a fire, we're just trying
Right.
to find the document.
Yep.
When you can get past that to a point where you're like, this clause keeps getting redlined every
Right.
single time, maybe we should change it.
Yeah.
That's a whole new level of maturity in your legal ops space, when you can have that room in your brain to think about what could I do better instead of reacting all the time, right?
Yeah, there's something to be said too for like maybe the next phase of your CLM isn't with the team that just implemented it. It maybe ought to
Right.
be
New
expanding to other areas of
eyes.
the business and like helping to drive some sort of consistent change throughout your entire
Hmm.
organization.
Yeah.
Too often there are cases where you end up with multiple departments all implementing their own tool, and
Yes.
there's a loss of benefit to having them all on the same tool, to being able
Hmm.
to like all grow together. um,
Right.
and like certainly one of the sessions that I attended at CLOC was on building a cross-functional team, and it talked for your CLM implementation,
Yep.
and it talked about bringing all these different stakeholders from different areas of the business all together. But one of the things that was mentioned was, even if those folks aren't a part of the implementation that's happening now, talk to them about the future, or even
Yep.
better, if they're involved in the business process, they should be talked they should be involved at least to some degree in the conversation that's happening now. I had a situation with a customer of mine where we're working with their sales team, we're implementing a brand new system. This was a couple of weeks ago, and we got to the point where we're confirming requirements to actually like say, all right, we're going to start building pretty soon here.
Yeah.
And they were like, great, we just need to check with legal on this. We're like, wait, but legal's been a part of this business process. How have they not actually been involved as of yet? And so we got on this
Yeah.
meeting with legal, and I kid you not, somebody on the call from the legal team said, so why are we implementing this tool? Because we're currently working on an implementation of a totally different CLM.
Oh no,
And so these
nightmare.
two teams who work together and actually
Yeah.
like they are involved in each other's business processes quite intimately, are
Hmm.
implementing two different CLM tools at
Yeah.
the same time, and neither of them had any idea that the other one was involved in this
Isn't
until
that
that very point.
bananas?
Um,
It happens so often, Spencer. I often get called in to talk to customers when they have
yeah,
three or four ways that they're contracting. So they could be
right,
using in-house or tools that they've built, or
sure,
they can be using good old Outlook email, or they're using other tools in the market, and they come to me and say, which one should we pick
yeah,
if we want to go with one? I like those conversations because they're challenging and they're fun, but I'm
definitely.
always surprised that you got that far down the road with four different contracting
Right.
processes. That always amazes me, but it happens more often than you would think.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's pretty wild. And then the other thing that, going back to sort of being a consultant in the space and informing your customers about how to get ready, we spend some time there. If you're looking to mature, it's usually with another line of business. I
Hmm.
think it's a good call out to say involve other stakeholders that are touch the contracting process but weren't involved in the implementation. That's really important.
Definitely.
And then kind of circling back around to CLOC or other legal conferences, if you're implementing and you're looking to mature your tools
Yes.
in the legal ops space, what kind of sessions what should you be doing at CLOC then if you've already got some of the tech in place besides trying to find all the great after parties?
Right.
What else should you be doing
Right.
while
Yeah.
you're
So if
there?
you've already implemented, or if you're in the middle of an implementation, either, um, I still recommend attending those sessions on
Yeah.
implementations and on making the case for CLM, because they're going to be beneficial to you. The knowledge that you're going to get from those, you might realize that you have missed something, and it's never too late to add that in. As far
Yeah.
as like getting somebody involved that you hadn't previously thought to be involved, or
Yep.
being able to even if you're halfway through your implementations, you've already sold the stakeholders on the cost for CLM. Like,
Hmm.
attending a session like making the case for CLM is going to give you ideas for how you can then how you can then like go back and like get more people involved and like prove out the benefits, show the
Yep.
return on the investment that you've made, even better maybe than you were planning on doing. um, I also think that for customers who maybe already have a CLM and they are attending a conference like CLOC, you're going to see everybody's going to roll out their latest and greatest functionality. And
Right.
while I don't want to suggest that seeing somebody else's functionality, you immediately like say, oh, and we need to re-implement CLM so we can have that. It
Yeah.
can give you the opportunity, though, to go back to the vendor that you're already working with and tell them, hey, I saw this. Is this on your roadmap?
Right.
If it's not, can you please make this recommendation to the product team?
Yep. Because they
I
do that, right?
absolutely.
Product teams keep track of new features and requests and
And
they score them. And then, yeah.
customer requests get weighted far more heavily sometimes than non-customer requests.
Yes.
I spent three
Yeah,
months
I
working on
agree
a
with you.
product team, and like all of the enhancements that we got from customers, 100% went straight to the start, or at least like got a heavy amount of consideration. And we then
Hmm.
went and checked with other customers to see whether this was something that they wanted, because it
Right.
wasn't. Like customers do help drive that product vision, and product
Of
teams want to
course.
make a tool that your customers are going to use, and they want to keep you all as customers happy by rolling out features
Hmm.
that you've requested. So take that opportunity to still like see what's out there. It's okay.
I
You're not
agree.
Your vendor won't feel like you're
You're not
cheating on
cheating.
them by going and seeing another demo, and asking them, you know whether it's something that they're going to be working on. Plus,
Yeah. I
sometimes,
think it gives you other use cases too. Like
yeah,
you might,
absolutely,
maybe you're in legal and you're like, oh, my sales team and I, we got this on lock. We're
right,
good. We know what we're doing. We have it all integrated. And then you go to a different CLM vendor to listen to something on procurement. You're like,
right,
oh, we can do that. Okay. I'm going to talk to my CLM vendor about it. So I think that there's it's just to spark idea.
Yeah,
So yeah, you should attend all of this, all of the vendors in the areas you're playing in,
definitely.
because they might have stories of things that you didn't think of, and they just spur something new that you could introduce at your organization and
Yeah.
be the new rock star because you brought it, right?
And
You brought it back.
with new things that like the brain date meetings at CLOC, like take that opportunity to network with other people in your industry, in other industries, who
Hmm.
have also gone through CLM implementations. One of the
Yeah.
best things about CLOC is the sheer amount of knowledge sharing. And so if
Yes.
you're part of a legal team, a sales team, a procurement team, whatever, if you've been through a CLM implementation, go to those sessions, share the knowledge, share the pitfalls that
Hmm.
you all ran into
Absolutely.
along your journey, and help somebody else avoid those same mistakes. And it's the
100%.
best thing that you
Yeah.
can be doing for that industry, and offer yourself as a resource, assuming that you feel comfortable doing so. It
Hmm.
doesn't. You don't even have to mention what vendor you're working with.
Right.
So although I'm sure that they would very much so appreciate it if you did, especially if it
I'm
was a good
sure. Yeah.
experience. But like,
Yeah.
share that knowledge. Talk to your vendors too.
Hmm.
Vendors love having customers tell their stories at these
Of
conferences,
course.
and
And I
talk
think
about those
stories are
lessons
so
learned.
powerful. It's such a good way to share, like, here's the challenge we had.
Yeah,
Here's how we got from A to B, and it took us a long time, and it was messy, or we
right.
messed up here, we wish we wouldn't have done this, or we really did this well. Like, share that, because there's somebody out there that's trying to figure this out for the first time, and
Yeah,
they don't know where to start, or they might be right in the middle of a massive disaster. They're trying to figure their way out of it.
yeah,
And I'm not advocating that every CLM implementation is a disaster, but software implementations are hard when you have so many stakeholders that you have to speak to, and there's so many pieces of it, right? So
yeah.
being vulnerable enough to share your experience can help someone else. And I love that about CLOC, because it seems like in that particular group of people, everyone's sort of willing to share and just make
Everyone's
themselves available.
incredibly
That's what
open.
I find. Yeah,
Definitely. I've
I find that
never
too.
encountered anyone who is who's stingy about sharing their customer story,
Mm-mm.
or about sharing their experiences with a vendor.
Yeah,
It's one of the benefits to bringing all of these legal operations folks together. If you take the vendors out of the picture, like, you have this opportunity to for a sort of unfiltered view, especially depending, based on how many after parties they've already been to, an unfiltered view
right.
of some of their experience with these vendors, or things that they've heard, or just the experience, the getting exposure to them. Plus, uh, there's always new vendors that are popping up too, and so
Right.
it's worth it. It's worth attending, if for no other reason than the networking. There are
Yeah.
a number of people that I've talked to that were at CLOC this year who didn't go for any of the sessions. They went for the
Hmm.
networking, and I've heard that story over and over, that like networking is the reason to go. Plus the fact that
Yes.
we know from being in the CLM industry and bouncing between working for different CLM vendors and consulting firms, that like it's a small world. You're going to not only run into
Very
people
small.
that but also you may make contacts that are going to help you, 5 years down the road, when you're looking to
That's
change
true.
companies, or something
Yeah.
like that. And likewise, there's a lot of education at CLOC, for legal operations professionals,
Yeah.
about getting involved. There's a whole section of sessions that are meant for brand new legal ops folks, and that's
Yes.
fantastic. Like, there's
I think
you know
it is too.
you can't get that anywhere else. Well, actually, you probably can. I shouldn't say that you can't get that from anywhere else, but
We're
like,
just
being
biased.
able to right being able to go into a group with a lot of other also new legal operations
Hmm.
professionals, who are not all coming from your organization, who have their own
Yeah.
unique viewpoints. I think
And
it's
you know what?
beneficial for
What I
everyone.
find is that there's so many. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to speak over
No,
you.
go for it.
I find that there's so many varied backgrounds in
Yeah,
legal ops, it's not just legal people. It's not just lawyers, though there are a lot, which you need to keep in mind. Like, they are the most analytical people on the planet. They were trained to be that way. So
Right.
having a legal ops person involved in your implementation, like, they bring a viewpoint that's analytical, and they're thinking about things that maybe someone that's sitting in tech isn't
Yeah.
thinking about. And so where I was going with that is there's a vast amount of knowledge, and it's not just legal and how to write an agreement.
Right.
It's like, I've spoken to people that started, in the automotive industry or healthcare industry, and they ended up here, and they have all of that knowledge that they're bringing. And so you could rub elbows with anybody at CLOC and find more information than you ever expected that can help you. You just weren't expecting it. So go, be open.
Yeah.
Put your introvert hat leave it in your hotel room and put your extrovert hat on,
Right.
and make connections with people, because it's not only beneficial to them or you, it could be beneficial to them, because you might be just a little bit further ahead in your journey and you have things that you could share you didn't even know you could share. So
yeah,
it's important.
Definitely.
So what's the next conference on your agenda?
So we've got Legal Geek coming up in June,
Mm-hmm.
that I'll
Yes.
definitely be at. I think that might be it for me for conferences for this year. As a consultant, I urge other consultants to absolutely go to these conferences, or if you
Mm-hmm.
can't get approval to go to these conferences, find out if somebody else from your company is going. My favorite part about going to these conferences, other than the networking, is getting to go to these sessions and gather information that I can take back and I can share with my team.
So important.
And so having somebody there who can gather that information is incredibly useful. Especially on consulting teams, we oftentimes get a little bit siloed, and while the larger your consulting team, the more ideas you've got floating around, bringing in that outside perspective, especially if you are attending sessions hosted by vendors other than those that you work with, brings in a fresh perspective that you can share with your team, and that you can share with your prospects and customers too. They're coming to you all as the experts. You owe it to yourself to get that level of education, and be able to share what you've seen as the latest and greatest, within the industry.
And you never know when that information might be beneficial. Like, I could have a conversation with a prospect tomorrow, and I maybe heard a story at CLOC about, going back to healthcare, that they were trying to institute something with patient records. And I would say, hey, you know what? I was just listening to so-and-so and talk about so-and-so. And, you automatically have a frame of reference that you can start talking to that customer with. So, just the conversations alone, the hallway time is priceless. Absolutely. At an event like that. Yeah. Switching gears from CLOC, when you're not at CLOC, what do you like to do in your downtime when you're at home hanging out with the fam?
Yeah, I am an artist on the side. I paint quite a bit. I love games, tabletop games especially. Anything to, despite working in technology, I very quickly found that technology as a part of my downtime activities is not a recharge. When you spend 10 to 12 hours in front of a computer every day anyway, continuing to sit in front of a computer or in front of a screen is not the most energizing thing to me. And so getting to engage in those analog activities, as well as getting outdoors, traveling. I love traveling, and living in the Pacific Northwest, we have beautiful weather, and so many beautiful places to explore. And so just try and take that time to recharge, and that bringing that aspect of mental health into giving yourself that chance to step away from these situations is incredibly
important. Literally unplugging.
Yes.
Literally unplugging.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I'm going to steal analog activities. It's my new favorite hashtag. I'm just letting you know. I like the analog activities. I also like to paint. I find I spend so much time in my I'm totally going to flub this. Which side of your brain does the analytical activity? Right brain. And so I spend so much time like thinking about that in my day-to-day life that when I unplug, I want to do stuff that's like the other side of my brain, which is artistic and being outside. So I totally get that.
Right. And
Are
like,
you a reader by any chance?
absolutely. As obviously the shelves behind me, it's about a
Sure.
fraction of the library. I'm graced with being able to uh, have a space for a lot of books.
Mhm.
Love reading. Again, it's the analog activities, getting you away from the screen
Yes.
time, and letting yourself just kind of escape, whether it's self education or sci-fi and fantasy, as is my personal preference. Things to kind of like
Nice.
escape that, they
Yeah.
escape the day to day, and refresh with something different, something that you're not encountering on a regular basis, is important.
What are you reading right now?
Ooh, right now, I just started a very, very classic fantasy, the Dying Earth series by Jack Vance,
Oh,
and he's
nice.
credited with a lot of the ideas and things that form the core of a lot of uh, a lot of other systems of magic as a part of games and other books. A lot of
Hmm.
authors have looked to him for inspiration, but even like Dungeons and Dragons takes a lot of
Yeah.
inspiration from his works, and so highly
Nice.
recommend it. It's a great read. It's also not at all modern. I think it was 1950s ish, and so
Oh,
like
fun.
sometimes
Okay, I'm gonna look it up.
the ideas are a little bit, keep that in mind. They are not necessarily modern ideas, but you're reading fantasy too. Like
Yeah,
that's always important. It's not reality, as part of these things. So yeah,
I
highly
love it.
recommend that.
I love it. I'm gonna have to check it out because I like to. I like sci-fi and fantasy stuff because it's not real, but I like to
Right.
think about how it could be real in my daily life. So it's kind of like, what if we could really do that? That'd
Yeah,
be awesome.
someday
So
we
anyway,
can have robots
someday,
drafting our contracts for us. That day is not
right?
today. AI will
It's
not
not
do that for
today,
you yet. You heard it here
right?
first. I'm sure maybe I'm going to be proven wrong in like 6 months. Somebody's going to go back and watch this podcast and be like, "Man, that guy Spencer didn't have any forward, like any future vision at all. What was he talking about?"
Right, as Rosie is drafting your agreement for you right next to you, and I think of that from the Jetsons, right?
Ooh,
Wasn't her name Rosie?
excellent reference. Yeah. Yep.
Yes, yes. Spencer, this has been a pleasure. I love talking about CLOC and just implementing and the stuff you like to do for fun when you're not doing all those things. So thank you so much for joining me. This was a blast.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me on the podcast. I feel honored to be among the crew on the CLM RX podcast.
Oh, thanks.
And yeah, shameless plug for your book too. Like, even if you aren't
Thank you.
listening to every single episode of the CLM RX podcast, um, and even if you're not a customer, I highly recommend the book to my consulting teams, as
Oh, thanks.
giving like leverage the knowledge. Again, it's that knowledge sharing. Leverage the knowledge of
Yeah,
people who have been doing this for years, and really put in, that get that education from
yeah,
others, and their experiences, and yeah, and then go and share it. It'll make you a better
yeah.
consultant. It'll also, if, for those who are prospective CLM customers, it will make
Hmm.
you a better partner with the vendors that you're working with, to have that
Yeah,
education and to have done that level of learning in advance,
yeah,
and know what you're
yeah.
doing
I
going in.
thank you for that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you for that. That was the idea. I always say sharing is caring. And if we all, knew a little bit before we walked in the door, it would make our experience all the better. So thank you
Absolutely.
so much for recommending the book
Sure
and taking
thing.
the time to read it. I appreciate it. And I love talking to you as always. So
Yeah,
we'll talk soon. Thank you so
likewise.
much.
Thanks, Cami. Talk to you all later.
Mhm. I'm just going to hang it up and then we can say bye.
Cool.
Stop recording. I think I stopped it. Um, no, I didn't, but that's okay. He'll stop it. Anyway, that was great.
Great.
He'll edit it.
Cool.
I think it was a pretty free-flowing conversation, so
Yeah.
I doubt that there'll be much edited out of it. But if you would like to hear the audio before we post it, I can certainly share it with you.
Nope.
Otherwise, it can be a surprise.
Please don't. Just go for it.
Just go for it. Okay, I'll be sending over some graphics for you, and then the links pre my post, so you can start to pre-share if you want to. And the graphics are yours. Like if you want to reuse them at a later time, there's a reel.
Sure.
There's Instagram. There's a couple of different ways that my editor does the graphics for you to share, and they're yours. So
okay. Cool.
Share away once it's ready, and then I'll let you know. It'll probably be second week of June, but I'll know soon when he's going to have it available.
Send me a couple of examples of other people's LinkedIn posts and stuff like that, and I'll copy their examples for it.
Okay.
Also, do you need a headshot or anything?
I do.
Okay.
I do.
Cool.
When you get a chance.
I will definitely get you one of those too.
Okay, awesome. This was so fun.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for joining. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. I think we sort of kind of stuck to our original agenda, but yeah, I felt like it flowed really nicely, and we ended up talking about partners a lot more and I think
than I thought, but I don't know.
That's fine. I was listening to the other episodes of your podcast, and like, I don't know that you've necessarily had a partner really talk a lot about that.
I haven't.
Brian at Malbec made some, who I didn't know that you knew.
He's great.
He's fantastic. He made a couple references to partners, which I really appreciated. Also, I don't know that I ever really answered your question. There weren't a lot of partners at CLOC.
There was. I know there weren't.
Like,
we didn't
Spalding Ridge
sponsor
had a booth,
because we were.
and Simplify had, an over-the-top booth as usual. Because they seem to have all kinds of money. But
I know.
But that was about it. Like, there were certainly a lot of like partners that are not advertising like CLM implementations. There were a decent number of partners that are like, oh yeah, we'll help you with your matter management or your document management implementations, but not a lot of CLM partners out there. So
I know, and Elevate didn't have a booth because last year we partnered with iCertis and had a booth, and they didn't feel like they got that many leads. And I said, well, it's because we were serving mimosas. I think that's why.
That'll probably do it. I see a lot more vendor booths, or partner booths rather, at like the vendor conferences. So like at DocuSign's Momentum conference, there'll be tons of DocuSign implementation partners there.
For certain.
But anyway, cool.
Well, have a happy birthday tomorrow.
Thank you.
Enjoy yourself.
Thank you.
And thank you so much for joining me. And I'll send all the materials over as soon as I get them.
Great. I will get that headshot over to you. Thanks, Cami.
Okay.
Have a good afternoon.
Thanks, Spencer. I'll talk to you soon. You too. Bye-bye.